For you lined up today, so let's listen to our first one.
Snapchat users. Snapchat is releasing another version of their Snap Spectacles. You may remember the ones back in 2016 as shown here. Snapchat will send their spectacle products to European developers pretty soon. Their only requirement is a year commitment and to pay £110 a month, which is about $150 US. Spectacles will feature advanced sensors for AI capabilities, high performance computing systems, and a vibrant display for sharp, bright imagery. The AR glasses market has seen an emergence of many products, such as the Apple Vision Pros, Meta's Orion glasses, and Ray-Ban's Meta Smart glasses. Social media today praises Snap for being innovative in the AR development, but competitive releases such as Meta's Orion glasses may impact Spectacle's success. There has been no public release date just yet, but we are interested in what you think. Are you going to get a pair when they do release?
What do you guys think? Would you buy a pair of Snapchat spectacles?
Personally, I would not. I think it's crazy how AI is completely taking over everything, including something as simple as Snapchat. And I'm not sure how helpful this thing is going to help the world, but we'll see where it takes us.
Would you guys be
Did it
interested?
say, I mean, I'm not caught it right, but did it say it was $150 a month?
Probably
Something
something like that.
Like a
Yeah.
subscription?
So for that,
No.
$150 a month for like some kind of service fee, if that's what that was all about, then I would not do that.
Seems like it's just the next technology race. Went from MP3 to iPod to smartphones to now it's just everybody competing about the next wave of eyewear and wearable AR.
I guess I'd be curious to know, I mean, for the price point that it's at. What is it off? What is it? What are these things exactly? Maybe there's something crazy about them that I'm like, take my money.
Yeah.
I don't think that's gonna happen right now for me.
Right, totally.
It's an interesting topic, honestly, like
I
spectacles.
think we'll see more of these coming out for sure.
Oh, yeah. So we just want to welcome everyone to another episode of Strowzine today. I'm Chloe,
And I'm Cam.
and we're going to be your host for today.
We want to thank Jason and Kyle for being on the show today. They are teachers in the communication department. So today our conversation is going to be focusing on how social media impacts crisis communication. We're going to be bringing up 3 different examples of PR moments and just how these companies and individuals responded. We have 3 examples. One is a negative response, a positive response, and one is a no response. So our first story we're going to bring up is a PR moment that involved Wicked and some performance.
Yeah, so Wicked is a Broadway musical that's being brought to the movie screens today. It should be out by the end of November, but in this specific scenario, we have Cynthia Erivo, who went out with a negative outburst on social media. She posted on her stories some pretty hurtful things that she felt about a fan's edits to the movie poster, and this is what she said. "This is the wildest and most offensive thing I have seen. Our poster is a homage, not an illustration. To edit my face and hide my eyes is to erase me, and that is just deeply hurtful." And in response, a couple fans took to the comment section of another repost of this, where they screenshotted her stories and they reposted it and said, what do you think about this? And we had a couple fans say, how in the world is that offensive? This is the most offensive thing she's seen, really? And for a longer comment, someone said, I honestly don't understand her outrage. Fans have been editing images to look closer to the source material since Photoshop became a thing. There are countless edits of superhero posters changing actors' hairs and costume. She's being offended over nothing. So our question for you is that you both have professional experience with this. So how does one keep a professional standing when they post something serious like this on social media?
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, honestly, is actually her own advice to herself. So she said a little bit later when she was doing an interview, I think on Entertainment Tonight or somewhere like that, she said something like, I should have called my friends. And
Yeah.
I like that actually. So I don't know, it made me think, if you, instead of maybe just going rattling off your initial gut reaction or your emotion or your feelings, maybe it's not a bad idea to phone a friend and just kind of let it sit for a minute and think about it and call that friend and be like, here's what happened, here's how I feel about it, what do you think?
Yeah.
Should I go public with this, or
Right.
could I be I get it, but yeah, I would go down that path. you never know what counsel you're gonna get. I guess maybe it depends on your friends, but
Yeah.
but I do like the idea that she was kind of almost kind of saying, yeah, I probably would have done that maybe differently. I should have maybe got some other people to weigh in on it. And I think that's the answer for me.
I think that in times where there's personal feelings and personal information and things like that, I think recognizing what platform and what channel you're using. This is social media. If you're 13 years old and have a heartbeat, you can sign up and have an account and you can say anything you want. And so this wasn't like a professional, entertainment forum. This wasn't a response to a movie critic. And even on social media, in a day of memes and going viral, people put things out there to get a response. Like she played right into somebody's hand, even though redoing the movie poster, I don't think was a ploy to get anybody to respond.
Yeah.
But how happy was the person that posted that the actual actress had a little tantrum and probably blew their subscribers through the roof, right? Like awesome. So just recognizing the channel, like it's social media, like anything from anyone can be on there. You got to really have a pretty heavy social buffer when you're responding to things, especially when they have to deal with you personally.
I think, one thing I was thinking about the whole situation is like, I guess I don't know, be in Cynthia's side slightly on the pin way would be like, I think her reaction was maybe a little bit extreme on this whole, like the wildest, most offensive thing I've ever seen. Like, that's a little bit much, right? But I think what she saw is, she's an actress. She wants the, I don't know, the accreditation, she wants to be like, and her face was on it, her face, her eyes, all that she was talking about. And when you walk by and you see that, or it is on there, I guess I should say, and to like, I think she probably felt like she was kind of carved out, because when you see the new, the new edit, if you will, like you don't know maybe who that is. So it might be a little bit where you like kind of feel like maybe personal attack, but like, it's me now. And I don't know, that so like it upset her.
Friend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't think that the person that made the fan art is like was trying to be malicious or trying to like purposely carve her out.
Right.
Like, but I think they were just making a variation that aligned with what the original design looks like, and that's really what it was.
Yeah.
So
You don't see it happening to her co-star, Ariana Grande. Like her face isn't edited out of it, but it's also not like that in the original illustration. So it probably is a little bit of that pride where she feels like this is my role. I took it in. This is like my baby. And Ariana Grande like has a very softer response because she's like, maybe her face isn't carved out of it. So she has a different response. We do have the response of Cynthia Erivo responding back to her own comment and how it was a little bit out of line. So she says something like, I think I'm really protective of the role. I'm passionate about it. And I know that fans are passionate about it. It was a human moment of wanting to protect Elphaba. I probably should have called my friends, but it's fine. So exactly what you said. Like she should have called a friend because sometimes a second opinion's better than no opinion.
yeah, I think she wanted attribution. Doing that new design carves her out. She took it personal, kind of freaked out about it, but probably not needed.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you guys were her PR team, would you have suggested, obviously, to do something different, but if she still wanted to stay on social media, what would you have told her as a PR team to post? Instead of her story, what would you suggest she does?
Phone a friend.
Don't post.
Don't do it. I mean, you gotta again, I think you take some time. Like
Yeah.
how like, is it really that big of a deal to you? Really? And and if it is, like, rightfully so, but I probably wouldn't respond by saying again, it was the wildest, most offensive thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You could probably share how you feel about it, but using a little bit less like strong like words, you know what I mean? But you could still explain. I think people would have received that a lot better. I think that's what's kind of caused it to go maybe more on the wild side, is because of the extreme reaction. If it would have been way more tamed and mild, I think maybe people actually would be like, oh, I can see why she might be a little bit bothered by that. But again, that's what I think set it off.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
would just calm it down, take a breath.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my reaction would be talk to your PR team before you
Sure.
post, because this is a great example of a personal knee-jerk reaction.
Mhm.
She could have been driving in her car, stopped in traffic in LA, and
Yeah.
seen this come across her feed. And before the light was even green, her reactions back on social media.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good, like, just think, like, breathe, take an hour, right?
Yeah.
Think through it, type it out, and then
Take a nap.
delete it,
Sleep
right?
on
There's all kinds of things that we can do, strategies you have to avoid kind of those knee-jerk,
Mhm.
oh, I shouldn't have said that kind of moments. And I think she just, again, got caught up in it and didn't use any of those. Her PR team was probably just as surprised as everybody else when they saw this come across,
Yeah.
because I don't think this is what their suggestion probably was to post.
And if you think about it, she did post it on her story. And I think a story is a very relaxed kind of way to portray your feelings. And so I think if she was serious about her emotions, it would have been smart to maybe do a post or even a video rather than just typical font on a story that is way too casual.
Yeah, so, I mean, strategically, just the entertainment industry in general, news moves pretty quick.
Yeah.
This is going to be old
Be gone.
news by the end
Yeah.
of the week. There's
Mhm.
going to be other things that happen. There's other things that are going on and planned that just in that industry, just things move so quick, you usually aren't, see a lot of image repair long-term needed for stuff like that in that industry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well, that's a negative story that we want to bring up. We actually, our next story we're bringing up is a positive experience. It's including Southwest Airlines. So in December 2022, they had several thousands of flights canceled. They had about 16,000 flights canceled. And if you think about this, this is during December. So people are wanting to get home to their families. They have Christmas plans, and to be stuck at an airport for days is not the ideal Christmas time event. So just kind of some statistics on what happened. Their system crashed and they had to pay millions of dollars back to businesses, to the Department of Transportation, and back to their customers. And ultimately, this example really shows a positive experience because from all that they had to pay, it really could have canceled their company. I mean, they were $140 million settlement with the Department of Transportation, $35 million cash penalty to the government. But they invested in a $1.3 billion in upgrading the IT system, which I think is amazing that Southwest understood what they did wrong and they were willing to spend several billions of dollars to fix their system.
Yeah. Sorry. So we just want to know, like, in your experience, like, what would you suggest Southwest to do before we get to their response? What would you do?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two ways people see what we've kind of classified as a good or positive response. Is it because Southwest really cares about the people that fly on their airlines and they want a better system for them?
Mm.
Or is it to kind of save their behind because they messed up?
Yeah.
Like, what's the motivation in all this, right? Some of these were fine. So it's not like, you know what, we're going to be good and pay $35 million to the government. No, you have to pay $35 million to the government because that's a fine. But the system upgrade was optional, right? That's
Yes.
kind of a thing that people look at and be like, oh, well, I guess they do care, or at least they care about continuing to be a business and an airline and give people an option for travel. And so I think how you frame it, the channels you use will really point an audience towards this is a good caring moment.
Mhm.
Southwest is a company that cares about their audience and their customers. And so this is what they did. Or Southwest was concerned about their financials.
Yeah.
And it kind of can go either way, and it can be positive, or that might turn some people off. And then there's another part of the audience that's like, I don't care, I need to travel. Southwest is cheap and
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with them, and I'm going to use them even if they don't upgrade their system.
Right.
So I think, I mean, from Southwest point, you kind of got three options of, what's your motive
Mhm.
more behind what you're saying in that instance.
I think to that, I mean, I think one of the things that Southwest does have going for them, like to your point of like, well, do they just kind of have to do it? Yes.
Mhm.
But before it even happened, Southwest is like, I feel like their unique selling point, if you will, like their twist is they are already known for their customer service. So it's not something that feels like a big stretch
Right.
that they would do something like that, or it actually sets them up really nicely to position it as,
Mhm.
whether it was about like, I have to do this anyways, they're easily able to naturally position themselves as, again, being customer centric.
Mhm.
And they did that, right? And so that's kind of that kind of aligned nicely. It's like we've taken care of our customers. we will continue to take care of our customers, and here's how we're going to go about doing it.
Yeah.
And it aligned with everything that they've already done in the past, so it made it really believable. And so I think that was a massive, maybe it was a happy accident, I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
just the way they've positioned themselves previously, and it set them up really nicely to handle this. So
Yeah. I mean, Southwest and their customer service is really the
Totally.
top tier. I mean, this was the perfect moment for that, perfect
Mhm.
storm, actually. So it was a really good opportunity.
And I think they blew up so hard because they were known for that. In some ways, it almost like it was a massive backfire, though, at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Yeah.
you guys claim to be so amazing at customer service, and I think most everybody believes it. But then when this happens, everybody's just like, maybe you're not.
Right.
So I don't know, like it kind of maybe caused people to question or maybe even get more upset because like here you are the leader and you just totally mess this up. You know what I mean? There was like hashtags going around that's like Southwest stole Christmas.
Oh,
And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like there was a big deal.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
the-
people were ticked off, rightfully so. Like, you
Totally.
know,
Yeah, the stress of the holidays on top of it, and
Yeah.
people traveling as families and probably hauling gifts,
yeah.
and right, weather outside, you're kind of crossing your fingers at that time of year anyways, that if your plane's going to get off the ground, depending on where you're flying to or
Right.
from.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was kind of two-sided there, like you mentioned, is this doesn't line up, but then the response was able to kind of rectify that a little bit.
Yeah, and we actually want to bring up the response because it was so positive. I mean, we had just talked about how negative it was, how families were probably so upset, being stuck in an airport for way too long. So we just kind of want to read what Bob Jordan, the CEO, had said.
Yeah. So he came out and said, I have nothing but pride and respect for the efforts of the people of Southwest who are showing up in every way. The tool we use to recover from disruption serve us well 99% of the time. But clearly, we need to double down on our already existing plans for upgrading the systems for these extreme circumstances so that we never again face what's happening right now. I'm apologizing to them daily, and they'll be hearing more about our specific plans to ensure the challenges that they faced the past few days will not be part of our future. So they don't want this to happen again, obviously. It's not a good route to go, but I think he handled it with such grace in the moment where he sat there and he said, like, this is something we did wrong and we're so sorry. And we're going to do everything we can to make up for it. But this is our plan right now. And we're hoping that it will never happen again.
Yeah, that's something you don't see a lot in apologies and image repair, is like the mortification, like we're sorry.
Yes.
It's not like here's an excuse or this is why, or it wasn't our fault, it was the
Right.
system, right?
Yeah.
And so to have somebody in a position of a CEO of a well-known company come out and be like, look, I'm sorry, we will try to fix it, right? We're following up with that corrective action. It's kind of like, wow, that's kind of what you should have said, because
Yeah.
we don't see that very often when you get into kind of corporate apology kind of things.
Yeah, I think you hear it. Like, I love that. I mean, I think you see these statements and you even read all these statements. Sometimes you're like, that was really carefully crafted. And there's not
Yes.
really an I'm sorry in there.
Right. Just
And
say
you're
I'm
like,
sorry.
just say it. That's
Yeah.
what people want.
Yes.
Why is that so hard? It's like we
Yes.
don't want to admit defeat sometimes. And so I agree. I think I loved to just reiterate, it wasn't a PR person, although there was a PR team involved. It was the CEO that it came from. It wasn't a spokesperson for Southwest. It was him. So it's the top, right? And I also love in there, the I'm sorry, very direct and clear, which just doesn't happen.
No.
And then what I love probably the most about it, I watched like he did like a YouTube statement. It was like a few minutes
Yes.
long, and where this kind of quote comes from. And one of the things I love that he did really well is he defended his people while also apologizing to the public.
Mhm.
So he was able to maintain like both audiences, meaning he didn't throw his employees under the bus and be like, yeah, we totally screwed up. I
Right.
mean, he did say that, but like he didn't but he explained why it happened. And he talked about like their systems and the logistics. And he also actually called his employees heroic. And you're
Yeah,
like,
That's
wait,
beautiful.
what?
Yeah.
Like not, you know what I mean? Like that almost like feels like this contradictory thing but he and I think his employees are going to come out of there being like, I love this guy.
Right.
Like he's got our back.
Mhm.
And he said they did a heroic effort in trying to manage this mess,
Yeah.
and he applauded them. And then he also asked for forgiveness and apologized to the people that had impacted in the public. Right. So
Yeah.
I feel like he did a really nice job of just managing relations between two groups of people that were involved, your customers and your employees. And I think he was able to champion both of them. So I
Yeah.
thought it was well handled that way.
No, I completely agree. And I think it's amazing how their company still stands. From the 2022, 23, and 24, they've gotten #1 in customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
So it shows how in a crisis a company can come back if they post and take this response professionally, you know. So you said he had posted that on YouTube. Do you think he kind of missed a target audience by not posting on Instagram or Facebook or another social media platform?
I don't know if it went on those other platforms. Like when I was just searching, that's where I found it.
Right.
But chances are that might have been the home for it.
Okay,
You know,
yeah.
and then maybe they would have repurposed it, sliced it up, and maybe sound bites or
To
things and
YouTube,
put it
yeah.
on. I don't know if they did.
Mhm.
I didn't look into that, but I mean, I think it's maybe a good home for it. Might lend itself to being able to share it,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure what they did outside of that. But yeah, I mean, they might have missed people with it for sure.
Mhm.
But you know, I don't know if they put it on their website.
Yeah,
You know,
they
should
did.
it, could it,
Mhm.
you know, it was like for me, if that was happening during it, that's where a lot of people are going to be probably going to try to figure out the customer service line. That'd be the first thing I'd have pop up as an apology video from
Right.
the CEO to be like, yeah, we get it. We screwed up.
Yeah, and especially during travel time during the holidays, the demographic may have been a little older.
Yeah.
So social media might have actually, maybe they had a strategy meeting and decided, you know what, Instagram's not going to hit a large part of our audience who's
Right.
flying during this time, who affected this. So let's go YouTube and website,
Yes.
and it'll probably eventually trickle down to those other social
And the
media
media will
sites.
probably get a hold of it.
Yeah.
Put it out there. Things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with you, like what you said, like where they can splice it, they cut it, they just post like a quick, like little apology on Instagram. But I think those main points are definitely going to be on the website, on YouTube, because that's where a lot of the videos are being sourced to. Like people are taking videos of their luggage and
Yeah.
like how it's being thrown off the plane and everything like that. And to put it in the same source at where that's coming from is probably the best place to be.
Yeah, as Camry said, you know, I was kind of curious. I'm like, so it's been what, a year, I guess, ish. You
Yeah.
know, and I was like, so I was kind of looking at it like a year later. So now what? You know,
Yeah.
holidays are coming back up.
Right. How would they
Right, this
preparing?
will be a massive proving ground, like
Mhm.
in many ways. But I also was just kind of curious. I was like, yeah, what has happened a year later, right?
Yeah.
So
What
to your
changes?
point, you brought up they won in 2024.
Yeah.
The top, you know, the
Customer
JD
satisfaction.
Power Associates
Yeah.
Award for customer satisfaction for airlines, and you're like, okay.
Right.
To me as a company, I'd been like, I think we're doing okay.
Yeah. We're
Like
doing
we've
good.
been able. That's a good like KPI, right? Of like recovery.
Yes.
If you won an
totally.
award that the customers are saying you've done it again.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. We're just going to wrap up, but we want to thank you, Jason and Kyle, for your time today. It's been so amazing to just talk about these PR moments and how companies and individuals can handle them professionally and sometimes not professionally and how that affects them.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us and talking about these crises moments. It really has been inspirational to us.
Yeah, so thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
On November 6, 2024, the Canadian government announced the removal of TikTok business facilities and operations due to the rising concerns of cybersecurity and foreign interference. Canadian officials plan to allow citizens to continue the daily use of the app while removing all official TikTok entities. In the article Social Media Today released, it quoted Canadian Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne to say, "The government of Canada has ordered the operations of TikTok, the offices that they have in Vancouver and Toronto, to be disbanded." Due to the recency of the news, little opinions have been published on the subject. However, the one platform with mixed opinions regarding the Canadian TikTok ban is X. A TikTok spokesperson explained, "Without citing any specific security concerns about TikTok or contacting us to discuss any concern prior to making this decision, we are always available to meet with our government officials to discuss how we protect the privacy and security of Canadians. But singling out TikTok in this way does nothing to achieve that shared goal." With Canada and the United States leading the world in apprehension of TikTok, how do you think other nations will respond? Is this truly a governmental concern?
And it sure is interesting that everybody's going after TikTok.
Yeah.
Seems like the US, the EU, now Canada.
It'll be
So,
interesting to see what happens.
yeah.
There's a lot of money involved. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I find it interesting that the thing that they are concerned about, that all of the platforms have privacy issues and have, surveillance and weird addiction stuff. And we're just kind of going after the one when I think we should go after all of them.
Agreed.
Anyway, so what are we talking about?
Yeah, well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm Jamie, joined by Avery. We have here with us Corey Kerr and Stephen Henderson. Corey and Stephen are both professors at Brigham Young University, Idaho, and teach in the communication department.
Oh, thank you. So, cancel culture is a buzzword that describes wanting to shame someone for something they have said or done. Cancel culture usually calls for firing someone from their job or censoring someone's online presence. With cancel culture's popularity and relevance, today we want to discuss the stances of companies and how they should affect digital communication practices and how social media practitioners can navigate these challenges. So when reading up on this topic, we found a report by Allison Westover, a corporate communications manager, wrote saying CEOs are the face of the company, and now more than ever, their beliefs and opinions are closely linked with the organization itself. For example, when Tesla CEO Elon Musk tweeted that the company's stock prices were too high, Tesla stock dropped as much as 12% in the same afternoon, resulting in billions of dollars in losses. No brand is immune to corporate cancel culture. All it takes is one tweet from the CEO, as we saw earlier, or an angry ex-employee with a Facebook account, or even a poorly executed commercial for the company to see his reputation negatively impacted. This is oh my goodness, especially true for the company's leadership. According to the Harvard Business Review, nearly one half of the company's corporate reputation, about 45%, and 44% of its market value is attributed to the CEO's reputation. So this leads us to our first question is, how does knowing the CEO's stances or beliefs on something affect the company, either positively or negatively?
It's interesting because across different industries, the CEO takes kind of a different role as far as I've observed. Like people still share stories about, is it Steve Ballmer, the old CEO of Microsoft? He used to have these crazy meetings and yell and throw things and all that sort of stuff. And I think that had a dramatic effect on perceptions in the community. But then there are other companies where the CEO internally is a big deal, and for the public, who cares? And so I think it kind of depends on the industry and why people ascribe to brands and what the value is that they're bringing in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even within industries, you'll see some really big personalities and some people like, can anybody name who the CEO of Google is? But we know who the CEO of Meta is, and we know who the CEO of, a lot of those
Apple,
tech companies, Apple
Yeah.
and, Amazon and those types of things. And so certain people put themselves out into the forefront. And I think that becomes a bigger deal, and that's part of their messaging. And other people, the company is ahead of the CEO. And so I think it really is a situational thing with industry and within each company on how they choose to kind of put that person forward. And if you get a bombastic giant personality as your CEO,
hope that they're like a positive for the company and for the brand and for that industry.
Yeah. And I mean, that should be part of the conversation is, part of the CEO's job is going to be like, are you going to be part of the public perception problem or part of the public perception solution?
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes you can't stop them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's a great point, because like a lot of companies, it's like, who cares what the CEO says if you're just selling t-shirts? But like when you affect like the globe, like Google or Amazon, where I feel like it could be important to know, be like, where do they stand in the world? Like, why do they care that they're servicing the entire world?
Well, and it's interesting because like at the end of the day, do we care? Right. And right, look at Jeff Bezos and, like failed relationships, marriage, things that does anybody actually care in that case? No. And is Jeff Bezos being canceled? Is Amazon being canceled in wide swaths? No. Right. Because at the end of the day, what do people want? They want stuff delivered in 2 days or 1 day or 4 hours or half an hour to their doorstep.
Yeah.
Right. And so how much does that really affect, the company's bottom line and how people interact? It's fascinating.
And then you've got other examples where there's hundreds of different websites on the internet where you can print stickers. It's not a huge industry, right?
Yeah.
But one of those companies had a CEO that came out and supported one of the candidates at the most recent election.
Oh, wow.
And so then everybody was like, cool, what are my alternatives? And so, or at least half the country said, what, where do we go
About
now?
half.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting thing too. Like, do we need to know the politics of the company to know whether we support that company? Because to some people that they're going to say, well, I'm not going to print my stickers with you if there are equal alternatives.
Yeah.
Where I can get the same thing at basically the same cost and not apparently support a candidate that I don't want to support. And so there's that type of thing as well, where I think to a certain benefit, if that person hadn't said anything, they wouldn't have taken a huge hit to their company.
Yeah, that's a tricky concept because no matter what you say on the internet, there's always going to be backlash, always, because no one is always going to agree with each other. So it's like it's a risk that these companies and CEOs need to think about every time they post or even say anything online, no matter what it is. Could be political views, or it could be like they like chocolate ice cream over vanilla.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like what Corey said about like knowing who the company or who the CEO is, because there's some companies we don't know. But I think I also like what you said. People are still gonna want their products. They don't care.
I mean,
Yeah.
we still watch golf. I don't
Yeah.
personally watch golf, but Tiger Woods, take Tiger Woods, cancel Tiger Woods,
Yeah.
da 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 da. Like, give it a couple of years, nobody cares, right? They still want to watch him play golf. And so, what is that kind of bottom line scenario where give the people what they want, and if those needs are being met, people still fly Southwest after what happened a year ago, right?
Yeah.
So,
Part of that also might be competition in the marketplace, right? Because I think you have several pretty horrific things coming out about Amazon. They're working their drivers so hard that they're having to pee in bottles on the side of the road. They're doing all this stuff. If they weren't a monopoly,
right,
Yeah.
I think people would have switched,
different options.
and so, you have like, this small market where there's a ton of composition in stickers, and then this huge market of online purchasing where, Congress is going after them for anti-competitive practices. And there's a lot of, things that are going on in that realm right now. There's not the same level of choice that's going on. And so I don't know that that nobody cares as much as,
limited options.
yeah, if you've spent 10 years destroying your competition illegally, maybe nobody has a choice.
Paying your warehouse workers diddly squat. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's like I just think of like the example of like the apparel wear, like Nike, Under Armour, Adidas. Like when Nike had some problems a few years ago,
yeah.
everybody kind of went to these other companies because they're like, oh, they all sell the same thing essentially.
And now what? Nikes are huge again.
Exactly.
I mean, it's crazy.
It's
Crazy.
because they are so popular.
Yeah.
At the end of the line, at the end of the day, nobody cares where they get their shoes from.
Yeah, but as mentioned earlier, so much of what is perceived as cancel culture comes from social media. Following a misstep, a company's social media pages and websites could see hundreds of negative comments. And if the crowd is loud enough, this can cross into negative media coverage. Many companies choose not to engage, thinking that a crisis, especially one on social media, will go away. According to Chief Executive Magazine, only 32% of companies engage in crisis training and simulation, stating that this is a recipe for disaster and will only lead to much bigger problems when a crisis does occur. How could social media managers manage this type of environment?
I think definitely doing that training, right? It's like you don't want to do a fire drill. It's like, okay, the building's on fire. Let's figure out where all the exits are now, right? You want to know what to do
And
ahead
there
of
may be one behind you. Yeah.
maybe we don't know because we don't have any maps up. There's no signs. We've never practiced this, right? And I mean, I think it's to be expected, kind of like you pointed out. I think it's to be expected that there's going to be hiccups. There's going to be huge mistakes made. There's going to be, people saying things that they shouldn't say. There's, you're going to leave people stranded on Christmas, wherever. Things are going to happen, right? Because, machines are not infallible and humans are imperfect. And so there's going to be that type of stuff. And so planning ahead and knowing well, who is allowed to speak, you
Mhm.
know, at this point in time? What do we do when we have one of these types of problems? I think that's the first step, right? Is apparently 2/3 of the companies out there are just like, you know, if something blows up, I guess we'll figure it out
Flying
then.
blind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would definitely recommend, you know, having a plan, or at least having some procedures in place for
Mhm.
when things go wrong, because they will at some point.
Mhm.
Yeah, do you think there's like a normal like process for each company should follow if they do get canceled, or is it just every company for themselves? They kind of just figure it out because when we were researching this article, kind of gave us some like
Mm.
basic steps, and these steps goes as number one, acknowledge the crisis internally. Number two, decide what the response will be. Number three, issue a public statement explaining the company's position, including admitting errors or mistakes made. And then number four is wait out the mob. So do you think that's like a pretty simple recipe everybody could follow, or does it just matter the situation or the company?
I think 3 and 4 are variables that kind of
Yeah.
depend on
Mhm.
the thing. So I don't think responding is always a good answer, right? I think some things you just let it go, right? You're going to have a very small vocal, you know, contingent of the internet that's going to be very angry for a few days, maybe a week or so, and then they'll move on. And then other things that's like, no, that needs to be addressed, and you really should act as quickly as possible to address that. I think there's a couple of things that would kind of come into play here. The size of the company matters, right? If you've got a company of 50 employees or 200 employees or something, the chances that you have a social media team and a PR team and a crisis management contingent of that PR team are pretty slim, right?
Yeah.
And so you might have the same 1 to 3 people doing all of those jobs. In which case, I think stepping back, you know, taking a breath and taking some time to figure out how to do, maybe even getting some outside help, you know, and reaching out to some people to say, hey, what should we do? Could be good, depending on how serious it is, right? In other situations, you might have a huge company, right? But a huge percentage of American workforce is working for very small companies. And so the likelihood that you're at a company that doesn't have a significant number of people that are specifically doing this one thing is pretty high. But if you are at one of those bigger companies, it's important to understand that this might not be the social media practitioner's job. It might be their job to take what they're told to say and craft it in a specific way and put it out. But they might be writing that response. They might not be, you know, making those types of decisions. They hopefully would be in the room informing the decision makers of possible nuances on different platforms and things like that. But it's an interesting kind of situation because, you know, the smaller the company, the less likely you are to have individual specialists that are going to deal with these types of things.
Yeah, is there a way for like the everyday social media manager, PR team in a company to like prep or even like be cautious like every day so they can avoid being canceled, even though it could be inevitable, but like just cautionaries that they could take?
The one thing I was going to say, and I studied public relations many, many years ago in undergrad. The one thing that I actually took away from those years was the PR messaging, digital marketing people. They have to be fully integrated with the top leadership. That's it. That's the bottom line. A company of any size, and kind of like what Corey's saying, if it's a small company, they don't usually have this dedicated team here doing this. There's not enough manpower to do that. But whoever is pressing publish, they better be in on all of the highest level meetings. And this was many years ago, but the studies were saying basically that these major companies and medium-sized companies were not bringing in their top PR people in to discuss really important stuff. And then right, the PR team is left in the dark, and then trickle down to the social media and all the other practitioners. But that's the bottom line. It's be aligned, be integrated. As far as like industry, whatever you want to call it, best practices, you know, keeping up on what everybody else is doing, staying involved in the conferences and reading the trade publications. Those are huge. You can't deny how important that is. But number one is like get your people in the same room all the time. Because if you don't, you're probably going to have bigger issues.
Yeah, those are great. So kind of leading into our last question. So like, how should businesses plan to react if they are canceled? Because I know you said earlier some businesses just shouldn't react at all, but like, is there a benefit to reacting or apologizing online?
Oh, absolutely. I think now more than ever, people value authenticity, or at least they like to think that they value authenticity. A lot of times they value the performance of authenticity, which is gross, but you know, it's part of the culture. And so I think the first thing that you should do is, instead of, you know, saying like, how are we going to spin this, is to say like, did we actually do something wrong? Like self-evaluation, and look at the situation, and are we in the wrong? And then if you are, what steps are you going to take to help those that you wronged, you know, some sort of compensation or remuneration or something along those lines? And what are you going to do to avoid doing that in the future? What changes are you going to make, right? It's the same thing as being in person, right? If I continually do the same thing over and over again, and I continue to apologize each time, does my apology really matter?
Yeah.
Is my messaging really matter? Verbally or in writing? Not really, if my actions don't actually back that up as well.
Yeah.
And so if you are in the wrong, right, I think taking accountability and dealing with those two aspects of, how do I make what I did right as best I can, and how do we avoid doing this in the future? And then other things are, it could be that you feel that you're not in the wrong, and that there's people that just don't like your decision. And at that point in time, staying silent, or communicating why, you know, you have that stance, or why you have that policy, or why you're doing that thing, you know, can kind of come into play. And I also think you look at like the zeitgeist, look at what's going on currently in the media, and kind of read the room a little bit, if the room is the entire world, right? And figure out like, is my speaking to this going to make it worse? You know, and so if you're on X, you know, you're on Twitter, and you have a part of Twitter is just blowing up, you need to look at that and say, is this just Twitter?
Which part of Twitter?
Yeah, which part of Twitter? Is this just Twitter, or is this a worldwide thing? Or is this, you know, is me speaking to this going to draw attention to this thing? Right. And so sometimes having a response actually draws more negative attention to the fact that, you know, it was happening in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to mention, I think it's fascinating. This is about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, when cancel culture was really like, the hot topic. It was just like, we're burning with cancel culture. What do we do? What is it? Pew Research did a really interesting set of studies, and one of them is just kind of how people frame cancel culture. And it basically divides right down party lines. So if you want to talk about cancel culture in terms of accountability, keeping people accountable, the liberal side of the coin says, yes, cancel culture is about keeping people accountable. And then you jump down to censorship. You say, is cancel culture a form of censorship? And the conservative crowd says, oh my gosh, yes. And the liberal crowd says, no, 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 no. Is cancel culture mean-spirited? The conservatives say, gosh, yes. And the liberal side says, no, not at all, or much, much less. Canceling people we disagree with, right? The conservatives, they're higher on the scale for that, and then the opposite. Is cancel culture an attack on traditional American society? In other words, freedom of speech, etc. And the conservatives say, yes, it totally is. And the liberals say, no, not so much. And then one of the most interesting is cancel culture a way to call out racism, sexism, etc., right? Injustice in the world. And then it divides just like you'd imagine. The liberal side says, yes, cancel culture is this way that we have to kind of fight back against some of the things that have not been ethical, moral in the world. And so you take Corey's response and you pair it with that, and you go, oh my gosh, what does my company provide? Who is my audience? Who am I speaking to? guess what? If I'm speaking to the Mountain Dew drinkers of the world, it might just be we're going to cut it this way and we don't care about everybody else.
Yeah.
But if I'm Starbucks,
Mhm.
right? Who's the crowd that goes to Starbucks? What do they care about? We
Yeah.
better know that audience pretty darn well in order to speak to them effectively.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, cancel culture as a term has become this big giant umbrella term.
Right.
It's become a boogeyman
All
to
these.
some. It's become a, you
Yeah.
know, a pitchfork to others. And I think there's nuance within this, right? Whereas you have the public that now has this megaphone that they didn't have before. And you have people doing horrible things,
Yeah.
right? And those horrible things should be called out.
Mhm.
Is that cancel culture? It kind of depends on who you talk to.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you have other people that make mistakes. They, you know, it might be bad, it might be good, or whatever. Should they be unemployed and homeless for the rest of their lives?
Yeah.
You know,
How long do we keep
yeah,
them
how long-
in
how
the
long do we keep
shackles?
them? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so it kind of depends. Sarah Silverman at one point in time said, who tends to be fairly liberal, right? Said, you know, we want people to get better. We don't want them to like commit Harry Carey, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
She didn't use those terms, but she's
Yeah.
like, we want people to get better. And so, you know, there needs to be some growth. There needs to be, you know, some allowance for those types of things. And so cancel culture itself is a very nuanced thing
Yeah.
because I think it's very indefinable when it comes to situational type things. And so you have, you know, comedians that said something 10 years ago or whatever, and you know, somebody comes out and, you know, is upset about it, and they either do or don't apologize or whatever. And it's like, you know, I hope that each of us, either as a company or as an individual, is learning and growing and iterating. And, you know, I don't hold the same opinions that I had 20 years ago because I've read more and I've learned more and I've listened more
Yeah.
in a very nuanced way. Right. And, you know, so that's one thing about this culture of like, you know, well, you know, you made a mistake and now, you know, forever for the rest of your life, you'll be
You're
tagged
dead
with
to
this
us.
brush or
Yeah.
whatever. In a lot of instances, I think that's unfair. In some instances, you made a horrible series of decisions that ruined people's lives, and yeah, you're probably a garbage person, and you know that's it, you know. And so, the court of public opinion is an interesting term because you know it's often used in juries and things when they're talking about trials. Is we have systems in place to kind of adjudicate these issues, right? When it comes to legal things. But when it comes to moral and ethical things that don't cross a legal boundary, then we have this court of public opinion, which is the Wild West. And you never know what is going to happen. And even things, jokes that are funny last year are not funny this year. You know, we know more, we've learned more, people's opinions have shifted or whatever. And so that's why I say it becomes very nuanced. You need to understand, you know, the pulse of kind of what's going on at the time. And react accordingly, because I don't think there's a single good answer, which is why we don't have like, here's the PR playbook.
Yeah.
You never need to hire a PR professional.
Do the
right?
following.
Yeah.
Here's the social media playbook, and you never need to hire a social
Yeah.
media practitioner, right? The reason that we have people in those roles is because people are the only entity that is going to be able to adapt with people,
Yeah.
right? And so there's no rule book that is going to be set in stone and never changes.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll speak just quickly from the world of journalism, right? We have like a pretty limited set of guiding principles: tell the truth, don't do no harm, et cetera, et cetera. So this is such a fascinating topic. A news editor was canned a couple of years ago for some old tweets.
Oh, wow.
Someone resurrected the tweets from, I don't know, 10, 15, however many years ago, and they are pretty bad. She lost her job, go on. She actually got rehired just a few years later by a different company. And her editor, the defense was so beautiful. I wish I had the language right in front of me. He basically said, the internet might not forgive, but we do. And I was just like, wow, right? Like, that's what we need. We need people who are willing to say, like, and he said, were those tweets terrible and offensive years ago when she was a college student?
Yeah.
Right. Yes, but should we be punishing someone for the things that they said when they were a 17-year-old for the rest of their life? And the answer is, of course, no.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It's just like at the end of the day, you just need to remember that the internet is forever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whatever you post, no matter what age you are, it's going to be there and people are always going to find it. But we can
Yeah.
also grow from it, like you said, with this editor. And we just need to remember that some issues are really big and some are really small. And we just need to pick our stance and pick a side. So I just encourage everyone to like do your own research,
Yeah.
use your media literacy, and yeah, just make sure you know what you believe in and try and find companies that align with it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really like that. You know, what's on the internet is going to be on the internet forever. And if you become like a well-known person or an influencer, that stuff can come bite you again. But I also like what you said, Corey, like just let it go. What you said about that company.
And don't be a jerk, you
Yeah.
know, like in your real life, in your face-to-face interactions, like treat people with kindness and respect, you know, not just when the cameras are on, not just when you think social media is listening or whatever. Because I mean, that's a huge problem as well, is stuff that is happening in the real world. Years later comes out and it's like, I don't know if that's forgivable, you know.
Yeah.
You know, that's a crime that ruined that person's life, you know, or,
Yeah.
or you've got a series of, you know, 45 people saying, no, this person's just a jerk, you know, or whatever. It's like, so I think this level of public accountability is interesting as kind of like an existential threat, but I don't think it necessarily changes what we've been trying to get people to do for, you know, the entirety of the human race, which is like treat people with respect, the golden rule, karma, like every ancient major like thought pattern in religion tends to have some sort of like harvest type thing of what you plant, so shall you reap, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing, is if you act with integrity, whether the cameras are on or off, whether the keyboard is typing or not, then most of the time you're going to be fine. And I do find that when you have somebody like that and they run into a problem, there's some grace that's given by the public, you know, when there's a history of a person being a good person. Right. And so I think that helps as well. And it sounds weird to say it in like a strategic way, because I think people should just seek to be good because they should, right? But one of the benefits of being a good person, or at least attempting to be a good person, because all of us will fall short of that and then have to, you know, make amends and make mistakes, is you build up public trust, you build up social trust, you build up familial trust, and those types of things. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, is I don't think most people are evil, you know. I think most people are good, but I think when you're hiring a CEO, vet them, you know. Are they going to be good at their job? And also, are they a total jerk? Right? Or are they a nice person? You know, are they going to make the right call? Do they have a history of being moral, ethical, and legal, as well as being good at business? Those are all types of things that you need to do with the CEO, with employees, with people in the public space. And then as an individual, right, as we go forth and do these things, being a good person is the bedrock foundational thing that we should do. And you know, you don't fear the sunlight if you're not trying to hide things. So don't do things that you're trying to hide, and then it just helps.
Amen to that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are great thoughts.
Yeah, well, I've learned a lot, and I hope that our viewers have too today. So thank you, Corey and Stephen, for being with us.
Great. All right.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. And that's the show for today, and we'll see you guys next week.